Commander Jake Morrison had seen many things during his 5 years on the Orbital Defense Station Sentinel. Solar flares that lit up the darkness of space, meteor showers that looked like golden rain against the black sky, the slow dance of supply, ships bringing food and equipment from Earth below. But he had never seen anything like this. The alien device hung in space like a silver egg, 3 miles long and perfectly smooth. It had appeared without warning 2 hours ago, right in the middle of Earth's satellite network. No ships had brought it. No signals had announced its arrival. It was just there, waiting. Jake stood on the bridge of Sentinel Station, watching the device through the main viewport. His hands gripped the metal railing so hard his knuckles had turned white. Around him, his crew worked at their stations with nervous energy. Everyone knew what was coming. 3 days ago, the aliens had made contact. They called themselves the Hegemony. Their message had been simple and direct. Earth had 1 week to surrender completely. If humans refused, they would be destroyed. The silver device was their proof of power. Lieutenant Sarah Brooks, the communications officer, looked up from her console. "Commander, Admiral Stone is trying to reach us from NORAD." "Put her through," Jake said, without taking his eyes off the device. Admiral Rebecca Stone's voice crackled through the speakers. She was the head of Earth's defense forces, a tough woman who had served in 3 wars. "Jake, what's your status up there?" "The device is still in position, Admiral. No changes in the last hour. Any idea when it's going to detonate?" Jake checked his watch. "The alien said noon Eastern time. That's in 12 minutes. There was silence on the channel for a moment. Jake could picture Admiral Stone in her underground command center, surrounded by screens and worried faces. She was probably drinking her 5th cup of coffee and trying to figure out how to save the human race. "Jake, I need you to record everything, every detail. If we're going to fight these things, we need to know how their weapons work." "Understood, Admiral." Jake turned to his science officer, Dr. Helen Carter. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes who had spent her whole life studying space. "Helen, are your instruments ready?" "Everything we have is pointed at that thing, Commander. If it so much as twitches, we'll know about it." On Earth, Admiral Stone sat in the command center deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The room was full of people staring at screens, talking quietly into headsets and drinking too much coffee. Everyone was waiting for noon. Stone picked up her secure phone and called the White House. President Diana Walsh answered on the first ring. "Admiral, what's our situation?" "The device is still in position, Madam President. Our people are ready to record everything." President Walsh was in the Situation Room with her advisors. She was a former senator from Texas who had won the election by promising to bring peace to the world. Now she faced the greatest threat humanity had ever known. "Diana, the evacuation of major cities is complete," said her Chief of Staff Tom Anderson. "Most people are in underground shelters or far from population centers. What about our military response?" General Lisa Parker, head of Strategic Command, spoke up. "All forces are on high alert, Madam President. But honestly, we don't know what we're dealing with. Our best weapons might be useless against their technology." At the United Nations building in New York, Dr. Michael Torres worked frantically in his lab. He was the world's leading expert on the alien messages, even though he had only been studying them for 3 days. The building was mostly empty now, evacuated like most of New York City. Torres had been listening to alien communications since first contact. Their language was strange but logical. Their technology was clearly advanced. But something about their messages bothered him. They spoke about humans the way a farmer might talk about chickens. Dr. Torres, his assistant Jenny Park, called from across the lab. "I'm getting more alien chatter on the long-range receivers." "What are they saying?" Jenny listened through her headphones for a moment. "It's mostly routine stuff, ship positions, supply reports. But they keep mentioning something called Standard Incorporation Protocol." Torres frowned. "They're treating this like a routine operation." High above Earth on the International Space Station, Colonel Tommy Hayes watched the silver device through a telescope. He was supposed to have returned to Earth yesterday, but the crisis had changed everything. Now he and his crew were stuck in orbit with a front row seat to humanity's possible destruction. Tommy, you seeing this? Called Major Bill Johnson from the other side of the station. Yeah, Bill. Looks like it's starting to glow. The silver device had begun to emit a soft blue light. It pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Hayes checked his watch. 3 minutes to noon. Back on Sentinel Station, Jake watched the device through binoculars. The blue glow was getting brighter. All stations prepare for detonation. Helen, are you recording? Everything we have is running, Commander. Admiral Stone, this is Sentinel. The device is showing increased activity. Copy that, Jake. We're ready down here. In the NORAD command center, Admiral Stone stood before a wall of screens, showing satellite feeds from around the world. Every major leader on Earth was connected by secure communication. Everyone was watching. President Walsh's voice came through the speakers. Admiral, what exactly are we expecting? Unknown, Madam President. The aliens haven't told us what their weapon does. We're about to find out. Dr. Torres looked up from his instruments in New York. If I'm reading their communications correctly, this isn't meant to kill us, it's meant to disable us. Explain, Admiral Stone's voice demanded. They keep talking about maintaining planetary infrastructure. I think they want to conquer Earth, not destroy it. On Sentinel Station, Jake counted down the final seconds. 30 seconds to noon. All hands brace for whatever comes next. The blue glow around the alien device suddenly flared brilliant white. For a moment, it was brighter than the sun. Jake's vision went white, then cleared as the automatic filters kicked in. The device exploded. It wasn't like any explosion Jake had ever seen. There was no fire, no debris, no shockwave. Instead, the device simply expanded into a sphere of crackling energy that grew larger and larger. Lightning danced across its surface in patterns that hurt to look at. The energy sphere reached the first satellites and passed right through them. But as it did, the satellites went dark one by one. Communication arrays, weather stations, GPS networks, all of them stopped working as the energy wave swept over them. Admiral, we're losing satellites across the board, Jake reported. The wave isn't destroying them, it's shutting them down. On Earth, Admiral Stone watched her screens go black one after another. Within minutes, most of Earth's orbital infrastructure was offline. Communications networks began to fail as their satellite links disappeared. It's an electromagnetic pulse weapon, Dr. Carter reported from Sentinel. But it's incredibly precise. It's designed to disable our technology without damaging the physical structures. President Walsh's voice came through the failing communication system. Admiral, what does this mean for our defenses? It means they want to conquer us, not destroy us, Madam President. They've just cut our communication networks and knocked out our eyes in the sky. We're fighting blind now. As the energy wave continued to expand, debris from disabled satellites began falling toward Earth's atmosphere. Streaks of light appeared in the sky as chunks of metal and plastic burned up during re-entry. Jake watched from Sentinel as Earth's orbital infrastructure died around them. The aliens had demonstrated their power perfectly. They could disable humanity's technology without harming the planet they wanted to claim. But as Jake studied the expanding energy wave, he noticed something important. The explosion was very controlled, very precise. It suggested the aliens knew exactly how human technology worked. Admiral, I think they've been watching us for a long time, Jake reported through the failing communications. This attack was designed specifically for our systems. The aliens had shown their hand. Now humanity had 69 hours to decide how to respond, and Jake had a feeling the aliens had no idea what they were really dealing with. 6 hours after the alien bomb exploded in Earth's orbit, Dr. Michael Torres made a discovery that would change everything. He sat in his darkened lab at the United Nations building, surrounded by backup generators humming in the background. Most of the city's power grid was still down from the electromagnetic pulse, but his emergency systems had survived. Torres stared at the data streaming across his computer screens. The alien weapon had done more than just disable Earth's satellites. It had also revealed secrets about the attackers themselves. Jenny, come look at this, he called to his assistant. Jenny Park hurried over from her workstation. Like Torres, she had been working without sleep since the attack. Her usually neat hair was messy. and she clutched a cup of cold coffee like it was her lifeline. "What did you find, Doctor?" Torres pointed to a series of wave patterns on his screen. "The electromagnetic signature from their weapon. It's not random. Look at these frequencies." Jenny studied the data for a moment. "They're very specific, almost like a digital code." "Exactly. This weapon was programmed to target our exact technology. They know how our satellites work, how our computers function, even how our power grids are designed." "How is that possible?" Torres leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. "They've been watching us, Jenny. For years, maybe decades. They know everything about our technology. But that's good news, right? If they've been studying us that long, they must know we're intelligent. Maybe we can negotiate." Torres shook his head. "I don't think so. Look at this." He pulled up another screen showing alien communication intercepts. "They keep calling us Category 7 primitives. In their language, that means a species that hasn't developed faster than light travel yet. So they think we're backward. Worse than that. I've been analyzing their communications for days now. They have a standard process for dealing with species like us. First, they demonstrate their power. Then, they demand surrender. If the species refuses, they use increasing levels of force until the population gives up." Jenny set down her coffee cup. "It's like they've done this before. Many times. But here's what's interesting." Torres highlighted several sections of the alien communications. "All their procedures are based on predictable responses. They expect us to either surrender immediately or fight back using conventional military tactics." "What do you mean by conventional?" "Big ships fighting big ships. Armies meeting on battlefields. The kind of warfare that follows rules and patterns." Torres stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see people working, by lamplight, trying to restore power to the city. But humans don't always follow the rules. Meanwhile, high above Earth on the International Space Station, Colonel Tommy Hayes was making his own discoveries. The electromagnetic pulse had damaged some of the station's systems, but the main computers were still working. More importantly, Hayes had a perfect view of the alien fleet. "Bill, hand me those binoculars," he called to Major Bill Johnson. "Still studying our visitors?" "Yeah, and I'm seeing some interesting things." Hayes adjusted the focus on the binoculars and studied the 12 massive alien ships hanging in space above Earth. Each ship was easily the size of a city, dark gray and covered with weapon ports. But it was their formation that caught Hayes's attention. The ships moved in a perfect diamond pattern, never deviating from their positions. When one ship adjusted course slightly, all the others moved to maintain the exact same spacing. "Bill, look at this. They're flying like they're connected by invisible strings." Johnson floated over and took the binoculars. "I see what you mean. Very rigid formation. In all my years flying, I've never seen anything like it. Human pilots would never fly that way. Too predictable, too vulnerable if someone attacks from an unexpected angle. Maybe their computers control the formation." Hayes nodded. "That's what I'm thinking. And if computers control their movements, then their tactics are probably programmed too." Down on Earth, Admiral Rebecca Stone was dealing with the aftermath of the alien attack. The NORAD command center was running on backup power, and communication with the outside world was limited to hardened military channels that had survived the pulse. "Admiral, we're getting reports from bases worldwide," said her aide, Captain Mark Davis. "What's the damage assessment?" "Could be worse. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out most civilian infrastructure, but our hardened military systems are coming back online. The aliens seem to have calibrated their weapon to disable rather than destroy." Stone studied a map showing the locations of surviving military installations. "They want our planet intact. That means they're planning to occupy Earth, not just destroy it." "There's something else, Admiral. Our deep space monitoring stations in Australia and Chile survived the attack. They're reporting movement in the outer solar system." Stone looked up from the map. "What kind of movement?" "Long-range sensors detect what appear to be larger ships approaching from beyond Pluto. Much bigger than the 12 ships currently in Earth orbit. Supply ships? That's our best guess. The aliens aren't just here for a quick strike. They're setting up for a long-term occupation." Stone picked up her secure phone and called the Pentagon. "Get me General Parker immediately." General Lisa Parker answered from her command bunker beneath the Pentagon. Like everyone else in the military, she had been working around the clock since the alien ultimatum. "Rebecca, what's your status?" "We've got bigger problems than we thought, Lisa. The aliens have reinforcements coming. This isn't just an invasion, it's a colonization effort. How long until the reinforcements arrive?" "Best estimate is 2 weeks, maybe less." Parker was quiet for a moment. "That changes everything. We can't fight a prolonged occupation with conventional forces." "Agreed. We need to think differently about this." At the same time, President Diana Walsh was meeting with her emergency cabinet in the White House bunker. The room was lit by battery-powered lamps, and everyone looked exhausted. "Madam President, we've established contact with world leaders through military communication networks," reported Secretary of State Robert Chen. "What's the international response?" "Mixed. Some countries want to negotiate with the aliens, others are mobilizing their military forces. But everyone agrees on one thing. We need more information about what we're facing." Defense Secretary Amanda Foster spoke up. "Our intelligence suggests the alien fleet is just the advance force. They're planning a full-scale occupation of Earth." President Walsh looked around the room at her advisors. These were some of the smartest people in the country, but they all looked lost. Humanity had never faced anything like this before. "What are our options?" "Honestly, Madam President, we don't have many," Foster admitted. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. In a conventional war, we'd lose badly. Then we don't fight." A conventional war. Everyone in the room turned to look at the president. Walsh stood up and walked to a map of the world hanging on the wall. Throughout history, smaller forces have defeated larger ones by refusing to fight on their enemies' terms. The American Revolution, Vietnam, Afghanistan. Guerrilla warfare works because it's unpredictable. "You're talking about fighting an insurgency against aliens with spaceships," Foster said. "Why not? They expect us to either surrender or fight them ship to ship, army to army. What if we do neither?" Meanwhile, back in New York, Dr. Torres was having a similar realization. He had been studying alien communications for hours, and a pattern was emerging. "Jenny, I think I understand how their military works." "Tell me." "It's completely hierarchical. Every decision comes from the top, flows down through layers of command, then gets executed by the bottom level. It's very efficient, but also very predictable. Like a computer program." "Exactly. And like any program, it can only respond to situations it was designed to handle." Torres pulled up a new screen showing analysis of the alien fleet's movements. "Look at how their ships move. Perfect formations, predetermined patterns, no individual initiative. So what happens if we do something they weren't programmed to expect?" Torres smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "That's a very good question, Jenny, and I think we're about to find out." In space above Earth, Commander Jake Morrison was coordinating repair efforts on Sentinel Station. Many of their systems had been damaged by the electromagnetic pulse, but the basic structure was intact. "Commander, I'm picking up alien communication traffic," reported Lieutenant Brooks from her restored communication station. "What are they saying?" Brooks listened through her headphones for several minutes. "It's mostly routine stuff, but there's something interesting. They keep referring to standard occupation protocols and Category 7 response patterns." Jake frowned. "Sounds like they have a manual for conquering primitive species." "That's what it sounds like to me too, sir." Jake looked out at the alien fleet hanging in the distance. 12 massive ships filled with advanced technology and probably millions of alien soldiers. By any reasonable measure, humanity didn't stand a chance. But Jake had been a soldier for 20 years, and he had learned something important. Battles weren't always won by the side with the best equipment. Sometimes they were won by the side that refused to give up. With less than 48 hours remaining before the alien deadline, humanity began preparing for war in ways no one had ever imagined. In the Pentagon's underground command center, General Lisa Parker stood before a room full of military leaders from around the world. The meeting had been arranged through emergency military networks that had survived the electromagnetic pulse. "Ladies and gentlemen, "We're not going to fight the war the aliens expect," Parker announced. "We're going to fight the war they can't understand." On the large screen behind her, a map of the world showed military installations, civilian infrastructure, and key strategic points. But this wasn't a typical battle plan. Instead of showing army positions and naval fleets, it highlighted something completely different. Colonel David Martinez from the Mexican Air Force raised his hand. "General, I don't understand. You're showing locations of amateur radio operators, civilian airports, and commercial shipping routes. How does this help us fight alien warships?" Parker smiled grimly. "Because those alien warships are looking for armies to destroy and governments to defeat. They're not looking for ordinary people with ordinary equipment who refuse to give up." In New York, Dr. Michael Torres was working with a new sense of urgency. He had established communication with the alien fleet using their own frequencies, and what he learned was both encouraging and terrifying. "Jenny, I made contact with someone calling himself Regional Administrator Vex," Torres said to his assistant. "What did he say?" "He wanted to discuss terms of surrender. When I told him Earth hadn't decided yet, he seemed genuinely confused." Torres replayed the conversation on his computer. "He kept asking why we needed more time to make such an obvious decision." Jenny listened to the alien voice, which sounded like a combination of static and musical tones. Even through the translation software, it sounded cold and mechanical. "He doesn't understand why anyone would choose to fight instead of surrendering," she observed. "Exactly. I asked him about other species his empire had conquered. Every single one either surrendered immediately or fought traditional battles until they were defeated. No one has ever tried anything else." "What about guerrilla warfare? Insurgencies?" Torres shook his head. "The concept doesn't exist in their military thinking. They've conquered hundreds of species, but every conquest followed the same pattern. Show overwhelming force, demand surrender, crush organized resistance, then occupy the planet. So what happens when they encounter unorganized resistance? That's what we're about to find out." Meanwhile, high above Earth on the International Space Station, Colonel Tommy Hayes was preparing for the most dangerous mission of his life. Using spare parts and equipment from the station's repair shops, he and his team had built something the aliens would never expect. "Tommy, are you sure this is going to work?" asked Major Bill Johnson as he helped attach improvised sensors to the outside of their small shuttle. "No idea, Bill. But we need to get close to those alien ships and plant monitoring devices. If we're going to fight them, we need to know their weaknesses." The plan was simple, but insane. Hayes would pilot their shuttle into the debris field, created by the alien electromagnetic pulse, using the wreckage of dead satellites as cover. The aliens would assume any moving objects were just floating debris from their attack. The beauty of it is that they're not expecting anyone to be stupid enough to fly directly into their formation, Hayes explained as he checked the shuttle's systems. "That's because no one is stupid enough except us." Exactly. Back on Earth, Admiral Rebecca Stone was coordinating the most unusual military mobilization in human history. In the NORAD command center, screens showed activity across every continent, as humanity prepared to disappear. "Admiral, Phase 1 is complete," reported Captain Davis. "All major military installations have been evacuated. Equipment has been distributed to secondary and tertiary locations." Stone studied the reports coming in from around the world. "What about the civilian coordination?" "Better than expected. Amateur radio operators have established communication networks in every major city. Civilian pilots have volunteered to fly modified aircraft. Even truckers and ship captains are participating in the supply network. The aliens are going to target our obvious military assets first," Stone explained to her staff. "But they can't target what they can't see, and they can't occupy a planet where every civilian might be a combatant." In workshops and garages around the world, people were turning ordinary objects into weapons of war. Dr. Susan Clark, a physics professor at MIT, had become an unlikely weapons designer. Her laboratory was full of graduate students and local volunteers working on projects that would have seemed insane a week ago. "Professor Clark, we finished modifying the commercial satellites," announced one of her students, Tim Brady. "Show me." Tim led her to a corner of the lab where several small satellites sat on work tables. They had been designed for weather monitoring and communications, but now they were something else entirely. We replaced the scientific equipment with kinetic impactors. Basically, they're flying hammers now. Once they're in orbit, they can ram into targets at 17,000 miles per hour. Clark nodded approvingly. The aliens will detect them as civilian satellites until it's too late. What about the mining equipment? The Australian mining companies sent us their asteroid mining gear. We're converting the drilling equipment into missile launchers. The aliens won't recognize them as weapons because they've never seen anything like them before. Across the Atlantic, President Diana Walsh was addressing the emergency session of world leaders through secure video links. The underground conference room was filled with presidents, prime ministers, and military commanders from every major nation on Earth. My fellow leaders, in 36 hours we must give the aliens our answer, Walsh said. I propose we give them an answer they'll never forget. Chancellor Klaus Weber of Germany leaned forward on his screen. Madam President, my military advisors say we cannot win a conventional war against such technology. Then we don't fight a conventional war, Chancellor. We fight a human war. Prime Minister Sarah Thompson of the United Kingdom spoke up. What exactly does that mean? Walsh stood up and walked to a map of the world displayed on the wall. It means we use our greatest strength, the fact that we never do what anyone expects us to do. She pointed to various locations on the map. The aliens expect us to mass our forces for big battles. Instead, we scatter them into small groups. They can't target. They expect us to protect our leaders and major cities. Instead, we evacuate everything important and make the entire planet a battlefield. You're talking about turning Earth into one giant guerrilla war, observed President Chen Liu of China. Exactly. The aliens have ships that can destroy armies, but can they occupy a planet where every farmer might have a missile launcher hidden in his barn? Can they control cities where every taxi driver might be carrying explosives? Meanwhile, Colonel Hayes had begun his dangerous flight toward the alien fleet. His shuttle drifted slowly through the debris field. Its engines turned, off to avoid detection. Through the small viewport, he could see the massive alien ships growing larger as he approached. This is insane, muttered Johnson from the co-pilot seat. Yeah, but it's working. Look at their patrol patterns. Hayes pointed to smaller alien craft moving between the massive ships. They're following exact routes, same timing every circuit. If we can get close enough to attach our sensors, we might learn something useful. The shuttle continued its slow approach. Hidden among the wreckage of humanity's orbital infrastructure, Hayes had noticed something important. The aliens were very good at destroying organized threats, but they seemed completely unaware of anything that didn't fit their expectations. Back in the NORAD command center, Admiral Stone received reports from around the world as humanity's unconventional preparations continued. Admiral, the civilian networks are reporting ready status, Captain Davis announced. What's our weapons inventory? Nothing like what the aliens expect. Modified civilian aircraft, improvised missiles built from mining equipment, kinetic weapons, made from commercial satellites, and about 10,000 volunteers with more creativity than sense. Stone looked at the tactical display showing Earth's defenses. By traditional military standards, they had almost nothing. No battle fleets, no massive armies, no high-tech weapons that could match alien technology. But they had something else. Millions of people who refused to surrender and were willing to fight with whatever they could find. Captain, send a message to all units. Operation Chaos begins in 36 hours. Yes, ma'am. What should I tell them about their mission parameters? Stone smiled for the first time since the crisis began. Tell them to do whatever it takes to make the aliens wish they had never heard of Earth. In space, Hayes successfully attached his monitoring devices to the hull of one of the alien ships. The sensors would provide crucial intelligence about alien technology and tactics. But more importantly, they had proven something vital. The aliens could be surprised. As his shuttle drifted away undetected, Hayes radioed back to Earth. This is Colonel Hayes. Package delivered. And I've got good news. These aliens may be advanced, but they're not as smart as they think they are. Humanity had less than 36 hours to prepare for the most important battle in their history. They had no idea if their plan would work, but they were absolutely certain of one thing. The aliens were about to learn that humans had never been very good at following the rules. At exactly 72 hours after the alien ultimatum, the deadline expired. Regional Administrator Vex waited aboard his flagship for Earth's surrender message. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft humming of computers and the gentle clicks of his crew working at their stations. Vex had overseen 17 planetary conquests, and they all followed the same pattern. First came the demonstration of power, then the ultimatum. Finally, the inevitable surrender, as the primitive species realized they could not win against the hegemony's superior technology. It was a process refined over centuries of expansion across the galaxy. "Administrator, we are receiving a transmission from the planet," reported his communications officer. "Display it on the main screen." The image of Commander Jake Morrison appeared, broadcasting simultaneously from 1,000 hidden transmitters across Earth. Morrison stood in what appeared to be a simple military bunker, but Vex could not determine the exact location despite his advanced scanning equipment. "This is Commander Morrison, representing the people of Earth. We have received your ultimatum and considered your terms." Vex leaned forward in his command chair. This was the moment. Every species faced surrender or destruction. In his experience, 97% chose surrender. Morrison continued speaking. "Our response is simple. Message received. Response, no." The transmission ended abruptly. Vex stared at the blank screen for several seconds. In all his years of conquest, no species had ever given such a brief, direct refusal. Usually there were lengthy communications about honor and freedom, desperate attempts at negotiation or emotional pleas for mercy. Communications officer, attempt to re-establish contact. Perhaps there was an error in translation. No error, Administrator. The message was clear in their mathematical language. They refused to surrender. Vex felt something he rarely experienced. Confusion. Begin Phase 2 operations. Prepare to demonstrate the consequences of their decision. The hegemony fleet moved into attack formation with mechanical precision. Each of the 12 massive ships took predetermined positions around Earth, their weapon systems charging for bombardment. But as their targeting systems swept the planet below, they found something unexpected. The major military installations were empty. The government buildings stood vacant. The army bases showed no signs of activity. Earth's military forces had simply vanished. Administrator, our scans detect no significant military targets, reported the tactical officer. Impossible. All species maintain central command structures and military installations. Our sensors confirm it, sir. The primitive defense forces appear to have abandoned their positions. Vex consulted his strategic manual, a digital database containing the conquest protocols for every type of species the hegemony had ever encountered. Nothing in the records described a situation where the entire military simply disappeared. Begin bombardment of the capital cities. That will bring them out of hiding. High above the Earth's surface, Admiral Rebecca Stone watched from a concealed observation post as the alien ships began their attack. The first energy beams struck Washington, D.C., London, Beijing, and Moscow simultaneously. The government buildings exploded in brilliant flashes of light, but the cities were empty. Every person had been evacuated days earlier through the civilian networks that the aliens couldn't detect or understand. Phase 1 complete, Stone reported through her secure communication system. The aliens just wasted their first attack on empty buildings. Around the world, humanity's response began. From a hidden launch site in the Australian outback, Dr. Susan Clark triggered the first wave of counterattacks. Modified commercial satellites, disguised as space debris, suddenly activated their engines and changed course toward the alien fleet. The aliens detected the movement too late. The satellites weren't military weapons, so their automated defense systems hadn't classified them as threats. By the time the alien computers recognized the danger, 12 improvised kinetic missiles were already impacting their ships' hulls at 17,000 miles per hour. Direct hits on 3 enemy vessels, reported Clark through her radio. Minimal damage to their hulls, but we got their attention. At the same time, Colonel Hayes led a squadron of volunteers in a desperate attack from the far side of the moon. Using modified civilian spacecraft loaded with mining explosives, they approached the alien fleet from an angle the enemy had never considered. The hegemony's tactical computers were programmed to defend against military starships using conventional attack patterns. They were not programmed to handle cargo haulers, research vessels, and tourist shuttles modified with improvised weapons and piloted by humans with nothing to lose. "This is insane," muttered Hayes as his converted mining ship accelerated toward the nearest alien dreadnought. But it's working. The alien ship's defensive systems ignored the approaching civilian vessels until they were too close to stop. Hayes's ship, loaded with mining charges designed to crack asteroids, slammed into the alien vessel's weapon array and exploded. The damage was relatively minor, but the psychological effect was enormous. For the first time in their military history, the hegemony had been attacked by non-military vessels using non-military tactics. On Earth, General Lisa Parker coordinated the next phase of humanity's response. Across every continent, ordinary people emerged from hiding with extraordinary weapons. In Kansas, a farmer named Joe Miller activated a missile launcher he had hidden in his grain silo. The missile was built from agricultural equipment and guided by a GPS system salvaged from his tractor. It streaked into the sky toward the alien ship positioned over North America. In Japan, a group of fishing boats launched improvised torpedoes at an alien vessel that had descended into the atmosphere. The torpedoes were made from ship engines and commercial explosives, nothing that would appear on any military scanner. In Brazil, truck drivers used their vehicles to launch kinetic projectiles from highway overpasses. The projectiles were simply chunks of concrete accelerated by modified truck engines, but they struck alien patrol craft with devastating effect. Aboard his flagship, Regional Administrator Vex watched in growing confusion as his fleet came under attack from sources his computers couldn't classify or predict. "Status report," he demanded. "We are taking fire from approximately 3,000 sources, Administrator, but our tactical systems cannot identify the nature of the attacking forces." "Explain." "The attacks are coming from agricultural facilities, commercial vehicles, civilian aircraft, and unidentified spacecraft that do not match any known military design. Our defensive protocols have no classification for such targets." Vex stared at the tactical display showing his fleet. Red warning indicators were appearing across all 12 ships as they took damage from weapons that shouldn't exist and attackers that made no tactical sense. "Are we losing ships?" "No, Administrator. Individual attacks are causing minimal damage, but there are so many of them, and they are coming from directions our defenses were not designed to cover." For the first time in his career, Vex was facing an enemy that didn't fight according to any recognizable pattern. His ships were designed to destroy military targets, but how do you destroy an enemy that has no military structure? Meanwhile, President Walsh coordinated the global response from a mobile command center hidden somewhere in the American Midwest. Reports were pouring in from around the world as humanity's unconventional war machine swung into action. "Madam President, we have confirmation of successful attacks on all 12 alien vessels," reported her communications officer. "Casualties?" "Surprisingly light. The aliens seem reluctant to use their most powerful weapons against civilian targets." Walsh nodded. "They want to conquer Earth, not destroy it. That's their weakness." Dr. Torres, monitoring alien communications from his hidden laboratory, was listening to something unprecedented: panic in the hegemony's command structure. "Jenny, you need to hear this," he called to his assistant. The alien communication channels were filled with confused reports and urgent requests for guidance. Regional Administrator Vex was asking his superiors for instructions on how to handle a situation that had never occurred before in hegemony history. "They don't know what to do," Jenny observed. "Their entire military doctrine is based on fighting organized armies and government structures. They've never faced a situation where the entire population is the army." As night fell over Earth, humanity's message was clear. They would not surrender, and they would not fight the war the aliens expected. Instead, they had turned their entire planet into a weapon, and every human being into a soldier willing to fight with whatever they could find. The hegemony had expected to conquer another primitive planet. Instead, they had stumbled into humanity's greatest strength, the refusal to give up even when defeat seemed certain. Regional Administrator Vex had never experienced failure before. For 3 days, his fleet had been under constant attack from an enemy he couldn't understand or defeat. His 12 massive warships, each capable of destroying entire cities, were being damaged by farmers, fishermen, and truck drivers using improvised weapons. Standing on the bridge of his flagship, Vex studied the tactical display with growing frustration. Red damage indicators covered all his ships. His casualties were mounting not from powerful enemy weapons, but from thousands of small attacks that his defensive systems couldn't counter. "Administrator, we have received new orders from High Command," reported his communications officer. Vex read the message on his personal screen. His superiors were not pleased. The conquest of Earth was taking too long and causing too many casualties. They demanded immediate results. "Begin Phase 3 operations," Vex ordered reluctantly. "Target population centers." His tactical officer looked up from his station. "Administrator, that will destroy the infrastructure we are meant to capture." "High Command's orders are clear. If we cannot conquer this species through conventional means, we must break their will to fight." The hegemony fleet repositioned itself over Earth's major cities, but the cities had been mostly evacuated, their populations scattered into the countryside where they were impossible to target, without destroying the planet the aliens wanted to claim. The first bombardment struck New York City. Energy beams from space turned skyscrapers into rubble and melted streets into glass. But the attack achieved nothing meaningful. The city was empty, its people long gone, its military value zero. Similar attacks hit London, Tokyo, and Sydney. Ancient cities burned under alien weapons, but the destruction only made humanity more determined to fight. In her mobile command center, President Walsh watched the destruction of humanity's great cities with sadness and anger. But she also felt something else: satisfaction. The aliens were making exactly the mistake she had hoped they would make. "They're destroying their own prize," she told her advisors. "Every building they knock down is infrastructure they'll have to rebuild. Every city they burn is a resource they'll never be able to use." General Parker contacted her through the secure network. "Diana, the alien attacks are backfiring. Instead of breaking civilian morale, they're making people angrier. We're getting more volunteers than we can equip. How many active combatants do we have now? Best estimate is about 50 million people worldwide. Everyone from teenage computer hackers to retired soldiers. The aliens have turned our entire population into an army." Meanwhile, Dr. Torres was monitoring alien communications from his hidden laboratory. The conversations he intercepted revealed a command structure in chaos. "Jenny, listen to this," he said, playing back an alien transmission. "Vex is arguing with his superiors about tactics. They've never dealt with anything like this before." The Tauber alien leadership was demanding faster results, but Vex couldn't explain how to fight an enemy that had no central command, no fixed positions, and no conventional military structure. "They keep asking him to eliminate the resistance leadership," Jenny observed. "But there is no single leadership. Everyone is making their own decisions." "That's exactly right. They're used to conquering species with kings and generals and capital cities. Cut off the head and the body dies, but humans don't work that way." High above Earth, Colonel Hayes led another wave of improvised attacks against the alien fleet. His force now included converted commercial aircraft, modified private jets, and even weather balloons carrying explosive payloads. "This is completely insane," radioed pilot Sarah Mitchell, flying a crop-dusting plane loaded with mining charges. "But I think it's working." Hayes watched as his ragtag squadron approached the alien ships from 12 different directions simultaneously. The aliens' defensive systems, programmed to handle organized military attacks, couldn't cope with random civilian aircraft attacking at random times from random angles. "Remember, we're not trying to destroy their ships," Hayes reminded his pilots. "We're trying to drive them crazy." The attack succeeded beyond their wildest dreams. Hayes watched as alien patrol ships began firing at anything that moved, wasting energy on birds, weather balloons, and pieces of space debris that posed no actual threat. Aboard the alien flagship, Vex was losing control of his fleet. His ship commanders were requesting permission to use their most powerful weapons, planet-killing devices that would sterilize Earth's surface completely. "Administrator, we could end this resistance in minutes," urged his tactical officer. "Oh, full orbital bombardment would eliminate all life on the planet and destroy everything we came here to take," Vex replied angrily. "High Command wants this planet intact. We need its resources, its infrastructure, its population as workers. Then, how do we stop them?" Vex had no answer. Every military manual in the hegemony database assumed that primitive species would either surrender quickly or fight conventional battles that could be won through superior firepower. No one had ever considered what to do when an entire planet refused to follow the rules. On Earth, humanity's unconventional war continued to escalate. In Australia, mining crews used their giant excavation equipment to launch boulders at alien ships in the atmosphere. In Canada, lumberjacks modified their chainsaws and truck-mounted cranes to create mobile missile launchers. In Africa, wildlife researchers used their knowledge of animal behavior to coordinate attacks that moved like flocks of birds or herds of animals, impossible for the aliens' computers to predict or counter. Dr. Susan Clark, now coordinating weapons development from a hidden facility in the Rocky Mountains, was amazed by the creativity of ordinary people turned into resistance fighters. "Professor, we got a message from a group in Norway," reported one of her graduate students. "They're using their whale research boats to attack alien ships in the Arctic Ocean." "How?" "They modified their sonar equipment to create focused sound waves that disrupt alien electronics. Apparently, whales have been doing something similar for millions of years." Clark shook her head in amazement. "The aliens have studied our technology, but they never studied our imagination." Meanwhile, Commander Morrison was coordinating global communications from a network of hidden transmitters. His daily broadcasts to the human resistance had become legendary, inspiring people around the world to keep fighting. "This is Morrison with today's update," he announced to the global network. "The aliens destroyed the Statue of Liberty yesterday, but they can't destroy what she represents. They can knock down our buildings, but they can't knock down our spirit." The broadcast was intercepted by alien listening posts, and Vex heard the translation on his command bridge. The human's words made no logical sense. How could the destruction of a statue be considered a victory for the defenders? Communications officer analyzed this broadcast. "Why do the humans seem pleased that we destroyed their monument?" The analysis came back minutes later. The statue was a symbol, administrator. By destroying it, we have made it more powerful, not less. The humans are using our attacks to motivate their population. Vex felt something completely foreign to his experience: doubt. Every action his fleet took seemed to make the situation worse. Destroying military targets was useless because the humans had no conventional military. Attacking civilian targets only made more civilians join the resistance. "Admiral Zeth, this is Regional Administrator Vex requesting immediate consultation." Admiral Zeth's image appeared on the communication screen. She was Vex's superior, a veteran of 30 successful conquests, and she looked extremely displeased. "Vex, explain why a single primitive planet is causing our entire regional fleet such difficulties." "Admiral, this species does not behave according to any known pattern. They have no centralized command structure, no conventional military organization, and no apparent fear of death. Impossible. All sentient species value self-preservation." "Not this one, Admiral. They seem to consider dying while fighting us to be somehow beneficial to their cause." Admiral Zeth was quiet for a long moment. "Vex, are you telling me that these primitives are willing to sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts?" "Yes, Admiral. They fight for ideas they cannot even touch or quantify. Freedom, dignity, independence. They will die to protect these concepts. That is completely irrational." "Yes, Admiral, but it is also completely effective." As the 5th day of fighting ended, both sides faced a terrible reality. The hegemony was losing ships, soldiers, and equipment at an unprecedented rate, but they were making no progress toward conquering Earth. Humanity was losing cities, infrastructure, and millions of lives, but their resistance was growing stronger every day. Vex stared out at the planet below, where fires burned in 100 cities, but the lights of human civilization still twinkled in the darkness. For the first time in his military career, he was beginning to understand that some battles could not be won through superior technology. Some enemies could not be defeated because they refused to accept defeat. And some species were too stubborn, too creative, and too absolutely insane to conquer using any rational method. The humans had taught the hegemony something new about war. Sometimes the side that should lose simply decides not to. 3 weeks after the invasion began, Regional Administrator Vex stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship and made the most difficult decision of his military career. Around him, his crew worked quietly at stations, showing red warning lights and system failure alerts. Half his fleet was severely damaged, and they had achieved none of their conquest objectives. Communications officer, prepare a withdrawal message to High Command. The officer looked up in surprise. Administrator, are you certain? Send the message. Vex had spent the last week reading every report from his ship commanders, analyzing every battle and studying every aspect of the human resistance. The conclusion was unavoidable. The hegemony could not conquer Earth using conventional methods, and unconventional methods were beyond their military capabilities. The message to High Command was brief and unprecedented in hegemony history. Request: immediate withdrawal from Earth system. Species classification upgraded to chaos-level threat. Conventional conquest impossible. On Earth, Admiral Rebecca Stone received reports from monitoring stations around the world. The alien fleet was powering down weapon systems and moving into departure formation. Admiral, long-range sensors confirm alien ship movements toward the outer system, reported Captain Davis. It looks like they're retreating. Stone had been fighting without sleep for 3 weeks, coordinating humanity's desperate resistance. From hidden command centers that moved daily to avoid alien detection, she could hardly believe what she was hearing. Confirm that report, Captain. Confirmed, Admiral. All 12 alien ships are leaving Earth orbit. In the ruins of what had once been downtown Chicago, President Walsh emerged from an underground shelter to see sunlight for the first time in a week. Her mobile command center had been destroyed 2 days earlier, forcing her to coordinate the global response from subway tunnels and basement bunkers. Madam President, we're receiving reports from around the world, said her communications officer, Lieutenant Kelly Roberts. The alien fleet is withdrawing from all positions. Walsh looked up at the sky, where she could just make out tiny points of light moving away from Earth. For 3 weeks, those lights had represented death and destruction. Now they represented something else. Defeat. Send a message to all resistance units worldwide. Maintain defensive positions until we confirm complete withdrawal. Dr. Michael Torres was monitoring alien communications from his laboratory when he intercepted the final message from the hegemony fleet. What he heard made him laugh for the first time since the invasion began. Jenny, you have to hear this. His assistant hurried over as Torres played the alien transmission. Even through the translation software, the tone of confusion and frustration was clear. They're filing an official report with their government, Torres explained. Listen to this part. The alien voice described humanity as a chaos species that could not be conquered using standard military procedures. The report recommended that Earth's solar system be marked as a permanent exclusion zone. They're afraid of us, Jenny said, in amazement. More than afraid. They don't understand us at all. Listen to this classification they're giving humanity. The alien report continued, describing humans as a species that fought without logic, used civilian infrastructure as military weapons, and refused to surrender even when facing certain destruction. The hegemony recommended that all future contact with Earth be avoided. Jenny, they're putting us on a galactic do-not-visit list. Meanwhile, Colonel Hayes was leading the final human attacks on the retreating alien fleet. His volunteers, flying everything from military jets to converted civilian aircraft, harassed the alien ships as they tried to leave Earth's atmosphere. Don't let them leave in peace, Hayes radioed to his pilots. Make sure they remember why they never want to come back. The attacks were mostly symbolic now. The aliens were clearly retreating and no longer posed an immediate threat. But Hayes wanted to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. Earth was not a planet to be conquered lightly. One of his pilots, Major Lisa Chen, flew her damaged fighter alongside the alien flagship. "Colonel, I'm getting close enough to see their hull markings. Should I attempt to ram them?" "Negative, Major, let them go. But make sure they see you. Let them know we're watching." Aboard the alien flagship, Vex observed the small human aircraft keeping pace with his massive ship. The human pilot was clearly skilled, flying a damaged craft with precision that impressed even his experienced crew. "Administrator, the human fighter is maintaining position off our starboard side," reported his tactical officer. "Are they targeting us?" "No, sir. They appear to be escorting us out of their system." Vex studied the small aircraft through his bridge viewport. Inside that tiny ship was a human pilot who had spent 3 weeks fighting impossible odds against superior technology. The pilot could have attacked or retreated, but instead chose to ensure the aliens left Earth completely. "That is either complete insanity or extraordinary courage," Vex observed. "With these humans, Administrator, I believe it is both." As the hegemony fleet reached the edge of Earth's solar system, Vex transmitted one final message to the planet below. It was not a threat or a promise to return, but something unprecedented in hegemony communication, a statement of respect. "People of Earth, you have shown us something we had never encountered before. We came here expecting to conquer another primitive world. Instead, we learned that some species cannot be conquered because they refuse to accept conquest. Your solar system will be marked as neutral territory. The hegemony will not return." On Earth, the message was received by monitoring stations around the world and broadcast to the scattered resistance networks. In bunkers and shelters, on damaged ships and hidden bases, humans heard their enemy acknowledge what they had accomplished. General Lisa Parker was coordinating cleanup operations from the Pentagon's emergency bunker when she received the alien message. She looked around the room at her exhausted staff, people who had worked without rest for 3 weeks to coordinate humanity's impossible victory. "Ladies and gentlemen, we just received the enemy's final communication. They're not coming back." The room erupted in cheers, but Parker held up her hand for quiet. "We won this war, but let's not forget the cost. We lost millions of people and decades of progress, but we kept our freedom." Dr. Susan Clark was in her makeshift laboratory in the Rocky Mountains, reviewing damage reports and casualty lists, when she received word of the alien withdrawal. Her improvised weapons program had been successful beyond anyone's dreams, but success had come at a terrible price. "Professor, what do we do now?" asked one of her graduate students. "Now we rebuild. But we rebuild differently. The aliens proved that Earth needs to be ready for anything." President Walsh addressed the world from the steps of the damaged Capitol building in Washington. Behind her, the city was still smoking from alien bombardment, but the flag was still flying. "My fellow citizens of Earth, we have achieved something no species in galactic history has ever accomplished. We faced an enemy with superior technology, superior numbers, and centuries of military experience, and we sent them running." The speech was broadcast worldwide through the emergency networks that had kept humanity connected during the darkest days of the war. "We won this war not because we had better weapons, but because we had something the aliens couldn't understand or defeat: the refusal to give up. Every farmer who turned his tractor into a missile launcher, every pilot who flew damaged aircraft against impossible odds, every person who chose to fight rather than surrender, contributed to this victory." In space, the last alien ship disappeared beyond Pluto, heading for distant stars and carrying warnings about the small blue planet that had defeated the galaxy's most powerful empire. Dr. Torres was compiling his final report on the invasion when he noticed something interesting in the deep space monitoring data. Other alien signals were being detected, but these were different from the hegemony's communications. "Jenny, we're receiving transmissions from multiple sources across the galaxy." "What are they saying?" Torres adjusted his translation programs and listened to the incoming signals. His eyes widened as he understood what he was hearing. "They're messages from other species. Word is spreading about what happened here. Some of them are congratulations. Others are requests for assistance against the hegemony." "You mean other planets want our help?" "It looks like humanity just became the galaxy's most famous resistance movement. As Earth began the long process of rebuilding, deep space monitoring stations detected dozens of alien signals from across the galaxy. Some were warnings broadcast by retreating hegemony forces, marking human space as dangerous territory. Others were different. Messages from species that had heard about the small world that had fought off the galaxy's greatest empire and won. The age of human isolation was over. Earth had announced itself to the galaxy not as a species seeking conquest, but as a people who would fight for freedom no matter the odds. And across the stars, on planets oppressed by the hegemony's rigid empire, beings who had never heard of concepts like democracy and individual liberty began to wonder, if the humans could defeat the unconquerable, what might be possible for everyone else? Humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had proven that advanced technology meant nothing against the human spirit, that overwhelming force could be defeated by overwhelming determination, and that sometimes the best way to win a war was to refuse to fight it the way the enemy expected. The galaxy had learned to fear not humanity's weapons, but their absolute refusal to surrender, and that fear would change everything.